Welcome to the Claire Horatio Daily World Brief, available at clairehoratio.com. Today is Friday, July 10th, 2026. Imagine waking up to find that the invisible systems keeping your grocery bill stable or your drinking water safe have just quietly been placed on the chopping block.
Right, and today we're looking at a whole stack of global reports that reveal a pretty startling trend. It's this idea that public infrastructure is collapsing by design and private tech billionaires are, rushing in to govern that void.
Yeah, and let's start in North America with that exact dynamic. On Wednesday, the U.S. government formally declined to renew the USMCA trade pact with Mexico and Canada in its current form. So instead of a long-term structure, it's now facing annual reviews. What does a yearly review actually do to a $2 trillion supply chain?
Well, it effectively poisons the well of long-term economic planning. If you look at how a modern supply chain works, it's not just isolated transactions. It's a highly synchronized, almost biological system.
Because a single car engine might cross the borders of Mexico, the U.S., and Canada 4 or 5 times just during the manufacturing process, right?
Exactly. And the USMCA mandates that 75% of those components have to be manufactured within North America to avoid tariffs. Automakers design these production cycles 3 to 5 years in advance. So when you introduce a 12-month review window, you're just dangling a sword over every factory floor.
So manufacturers are forced to price the risk of sudden tariffs directly into their products. If you are a consumer buying a vehicle next year, you're the one absorbing the cost of that geopolitical uncertainty.
You are. And if you're a farmer in the Midwest or, say, Alberta, your ability to plan cross-border logistics is basically shattered. Your export market to Mexico could just vanish in 12 months.
And this trade pullback feels like just one piece of a much larger withdrawal of U.S. institutional priorities since early 2025. Globally, a new UN Women report just dropped some really grim statistics. 1 million women and girls have lost access to humanitarian support over the past 18 months due to sweeping U.S. foreign aid cuts.
It's a massive contraction. The OECD is actually calling this withdrawal of American funding a historic decline. And the mechanism of that decline is what we really need to look at here. The global humanitarian infrastructure relies heavily on anchor funding.
So when the largest anchor pulls out abruptly, the whole web just collapses. The UN report notes that 84% of women's organizations are seeing increased demand while actively facing shutdowns. And conflict-related sexual violence doubled in 2025 alone.
Yeah, and the philosophy driving this was articulated by a senior White House official who stated that the American taxpayer was never meant to take care of every person on Earth. The result is just this rapid dismantling of systems that protect the most vulnerable populations during crises.
The domestic contraction is just as severe, and it's impacting the air we breathe and the soil we walk on. U.S. federal science agencies have shed roughly 118,000 jobs since September 2024. What happens mechanically to a society's resilience when basic environmental monitoring is defunded like that?
You lose the longitudinal data, which is essentially a society's radar system. Those 118,000 lost jobs aren't just abstract bureaucrats. They're the epidemiologists tracking avian flu before it hits poultry farms.
Or the meteorologists updating models for atmospheric rivers so coastal towns can evacuate. We're actually seeing this reactive survival play out right now. Former NOAA staff just launched an independent site called climate.us to replace the dismantled government climate.gov database.
Which means you have scientists volunteering their weekends to keep basic environmental reporting accessible. But relying on a crowd-funded neighborhood watch to track planetary-scale climate threats is incredibly dangerous. An ad hoc network simply can't maintain the supercomputers required to model complex global weather.
Right, the physical infrastructure of science is incredibly expensive. That withdrawal of U.S. funding leaves a massive vacuum on the global stage. So how are nations adapting to fight their own battles in that vacuum? Look at Eastern Europe on Friday, where President Volodymyr Zelensky signed a decree establishing a long-range impact command.
And we saw this strategy execute vividly on Friday. Ukrainian drone strikes ignited massive fires at the Ilsky oil refinery, which processes 138,000 barrels a day, and the Kirkinefty product oil terminal in Rostov. Ukraine is basically using cheap, mass-produced drones as a form of long-range economic sanctions.
Think of Russia's oil infrastructure like a heavily armored knight, and Ukraine's drones are a swarm of bees. They can't pierce the armor directly, but they sting the joints and supply lines. The civic impacts inside Russia are escalating fast. Following Friday's strikes, Moscow was forced to halt shipping through the Donazov Channel.
And that waterway handles up to 25% of Russia's wheat exports. When you disrupt a quarter of a superpower's agricultural export capacity, you're destabilizing global food prices while simultaneously crippling domestic logistics. Russia has already been forced to ban diesel exports to manage severe internal fuel shortages.
Wait, let me get this straight regarding the U.S. role here. We just discussed the U.S. slashing global aid. But on Friday, U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham was in Kyiv pushing a bipartisan sanctions bill targeting countries that buy Russian energy. Are we withdrawing from the world or trying to actively control its energy markets?
The U.S. is attempting to exert control without spending its own capital. It's the weaponization of the financial system. The legislative pressure from Washington is designed to act as the anvil, while Ukraine's kinetic drone strikes act as the hammer.
By threatening secondary sanctions against global buyers, the U.S. hopes to make the continuation of the war financially ruinous for Moscow. For more daily briefings, brain candy explainers, and classic audiobooks, visit clarinarratio.com. Now, speaking of using technology to bypass traditional systems, what happens when a new technology is so powerful a government shuts it down globally?
You're talking about the U.S. Commerce Department imposing strict export controls on Anthropic's new Claude Fable 5 and Mythos 5 AI models. Washington basically instituted a global kill switch based on fears of jailbreaking, which is prompting an AI to ignore its safety rails.
They banned foreign nationals worldwide from using the models, forcing Anthropic to suspend global access entirely. G7 leaders are furious. French President Emmanuel Macron warned on Wednesday that Europe will refuse to buy models if Washington can just reach across borders and flip a switch overnight.
A global kill switch fundamentally alters the geopolitics of technology. The U.S. government is demonstrating that it views advanced AI as a heavily regulated munition. And the context here is that earlier this year, Anthropic clashed aggressively with the Pentagon over autonomous lethal weapons.
How does an AI kill chain actually function in modern warfare, and why is Washington so concerned with Anthropic setting its own moral boundaries?
In traditional warfare, a human operator identifies a target and makes the moral decision to pull the trigger. An AI kill chain removes that friction. You feed drone feeds and intercepted communications into an algorithm, and the AI autonomously targets and neutralizes threats in milliseconds.
The moral hazard there is staggering. You are delegating life and death decisions to a black box that cannot comprehend the nuances of surrender. So when Anthropic refused to participate in robotized policing, they established a corporate moral boundary that the U.S. government is now suppressing.
Exactly. And that friction between regulatory crackdowns and tech companies is bleeding into corporate warfare, too. Apple is currently suing OpenAI for trade secret theft. The lawsuit claims former Apple executives from I/O Products instruct new recruits to bring actual physical Apple parts as props to their job interviews.
Apple alleges OpenAI is stealing confidential manufacturing techniques. It is a messy, hyper-litigious environment in the U.S. right now. Contrast that with what happened on Friday in Asia, where China successfully landed its first reusable rocket, the Long March 10B, catching the booster in a net on a floating platform.
The mechanism of a reusable rocket drastically alters the economics of space logistics. It turns a multi-million-dollar disposable vehicle into an aircraft that just needs refueling. China is executing massive leaps in physical engineering while American tech giants are locked in trade secret lawsuits.
And that low Earth orbit infrastructure is increasingly controlled by a fraction of the population. On the same day China landed its rocket, Elon Musk's SpaceX made its market debut on the NASDAQ. The IPO raised $75 billion on Friday, valuing the company at roughly $2.1 trillion and making Musk the world's first paper trillionaire.
But look at the actual numbers. SpaceX generated $18.7 billion in revenue last year, while incurring a net loss of $4.9 billion. The company is valued at well over a century of its current revenue.
If you look past the market hype, the civic concern is that a handful of private individuals now control the literal infrastructure of space and artificial intelligence. They effectively function as unelected global superpowers.
When one person controls the satellite internet architecture that a nation relies on for its military defense, democratic oversight is bypassed. If the foundational architecture of the 21st century is entirely privately owned, citizens lose the ability to hold the architects accountable. You can't just vote out a CEO.
You mentioned bypassing democratic oversight. We're actually seeing a movement where tech billionaires are explicitly trying to replace democratic government altogether. Look at the Free Republic of Liberland, a disputed floodplain on the Danube River, backed by crypto billionaires like Justin Sun and Tim Draper.
Right. In Liberland, citizens vote using purchasable crypto tokens called merits. You are literally buying your voting power. That structure aligns perfectly with the patchwork philosophy championed by tech founder Curtis Yarvin, who advocates for replacing nation-states with corporate monarchies run by CEO kings.
In this system, military and police forces are controlled by a central crypto dingus. Explain mechanically what a crypto dingus actually is, because it sounds absurd, but the implications are terrifying.
A crypto dingus is a cryptographic lock. It's essentially a smart contract integrated into physical hardware. It ensures that the society's weaponry and police gear can only be activated by the cryptographic key held by the CEO king. It physically locks the monopoly on violence behind a blockchain protocol.
By linking voting power directly to financial wealth, this ideology strips away the foundational democratic principle of human equality. If I am broke in that system, I just have no rights. It's a pay-to-play democracy.
And the hostility toward the social contract is overtly stated by its architects. Liberland's interior minister actually justified their tax-free society by explicitly comparing poor people to animals, stating, "Don't feed the animals because if you do, they will lose the ability to feed themselves."
And this ideology has vast financial backing. Justin Sun was the lead token investor, putting $75 million into the Trump family's World Liberty financial crypto business. Plus, blockchain analytics firm TRM Labs notes that Sun's Tron blockchain has been heavily utilized for illicit crypto, including cartel and terror financing.
The profound danger of replacing democratic accountability with algorithmic, wealth-driven rule is that it permanently institutionalizes cruelty. Democratic governments are mandated to provide for the general welfare, but these blockchain utopias actively design out public services.
While billionaires debate building corporate monarchies in cyberspace, ordinary citizens are dealing with the inescapable physical reality of a burning planet. Look at the devastating wildfire in Andalusia, Spain on Friday. At least 12 people are dead and 23 remain missing.
The fire occurred during a severe heat wave with temperatures hitting 40 degrees Celsius, and it's suspected to be caused by a downed power line. This tragedy demonstrates the immediate, lethal consequences of aging infrastructure interacting with extreme weather.
The climate is heating up twice as fast as the global average in Europe. The failure to maintain power grids and adequately map evacuation routes represents a catastrophic breakdown in the basic civic duty to protect human life. And that breakdown is also unfolding through unseen industrial contamination.
You're referring to Thornton Cleveley's Lancashire. The AGC Chemicals Europe plant emitted an estimated 49 tons of PFOA, which is a banned forever chemical, over several decades.
The human cost here is visceral. Liz Hurst was diagnosed with a rare kidney cancer at age 32. Alan Hodson's allotment garden was forcibly closed after his beetroot tested at 7 times the Belgian guideline for PFOA in soil. Sam Hammond discovered her duck eggs contain 10 times the European safe weekly limit for PFAS.
Mechanically, they are called forever chemicals because of the carbon-fluorine bond, which is one of the strongest bonds in organic chemistry. It doesn't break down in nature, and it doesn't degrade in the human body. When 49 tons are emitted, it just settles into the soil and concentrates in the food chain.
What makes this even more devastating is that this environmental health crisis is occurring just as social safety nets are being tightened. This week, the German Bundesrat passed a healthcare savings package that cuts spending and increases patient copays for prescription medicines.
The state is actively shifting the financial cost of healthcare back onto the individual at the exact moment. Communities are facing increased health burdens from corporate pollution and climate extremes. The cost of cleaning up forever chemicals is being externalized onto the citizens who can least afford it.
If we look across all the reports from today, a stark pattern emerges. We are witnessing a rapidly widening gap between massive, concentrated private power and the increasing vulnerability of ordinary citizens. On one end, we have trillion-dollar space valuations and AI kill switches.
And on the other end, we have communities dealing with toxic soil in their gardens, vanishing federal science monitoring, and lethal weather events. The underlying dynamic is the abandonment of the public good in favor of private immunity.
The institutions designed to protect the vulnerable are being defunded or circumvented by those with the capital to build their own alternatives. We've talked a lot today about billionaires building escape hatches. But if all the capital is focused on escaping the physical world, who is left to govern the ground we actually walk on?
That's the critical issue. When the wealthiest individuals can effectively secede from the consequences of environmental degradation, the burden of survival falls entirely on the citizens left navigating the physical world.
As you look at the extreme weather, the hollowed out public services, and the political shifts around you this week, ask yourself, are you a citizen of a nation or just a subscriber to a platform? For more Daily World Briefs, Brain Candy, or Debate Candy episodes for slower context, visit clarineratio.com. Staying informed is the first step to holding power accountable. Take care, and we will speak with you soon.